everyone, I'm Paula Gilbert. I'm the editor of Connecting Africa, and I'm here at MWC Kigali in Rwanda, and I'm with Angela Wamola, who is the head of Africa at the GSMA. So nice to have you.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, so nice to see you again. So this year at MWC Kigali, I feel like there's been three major themes, right? The first one is device affordability. The second one is AI in African languages, and then energy resilience. And I kind of maybe thought the fourth one also was talking about investment, to enable all of those things. So firstly, on handset affordability, why is it so critical, to get affordable smartphones into the hands of Africans, and kind of like what's the plan to make that happen?
So when you look at where we are today in Africa, the dawn of AI, the urgency to solve a lot of our structural infrastructure problems as well, overcoming those constraints. In our keynote yesterday with our Director General Vivek Badrinath, we spoke about the opportunities around investment, inclusion, right, and innovation. And so when you look at the opportunity we have today as Africa is that we have statistics today show that we have 1.5 billion people in Africa. And our latest information in the state of the mobile internet connectivity in Africa show that 30% of the population are connected and online. Whereas we have another 69% who have access to broadband coverage, so they do have either a 3G, 4G, or 5G mobile signal, but have never gone online.
Yeah.
And then we have a small percentage of 9%, which is a great job that Africa has done over the last 7 years, between 2017 and now, that the coverage gap has dropped from 35% to 9%. Now, what does that mean? When we look at the opportunities of leapfrogging and giving every single African the benefits of living a very modern, connected life, we see that we have quite a large population, close to 960 million people, who are not being able to take advantage of connected societies. And so we ask ourselves, what are the major challenges? And these challenges have existed over time. The barriers are known. The biggest one being affordability of devices, which comes in hand with affordability of the data. And we have to try and unpack that. And then there's also challenges around those who have access to a mobile device but have never gone online. In Africa, that's around 4%. So you see that a certain amount of the population have access to a smartphone but have never gone online. And so challenges around access to relevant content or in their local languages becomes therefore a challenge. And so that's where the opportunities come in around AI and understanding that we have an opportunity not only to be consumers of content, but to create our own content. And that's the way we look at the challenge around the usage gap. It's actually a two-sided coin. Understanding that you do need the device in order to go online, but at the same time, you need the content in your language to go online, because that's more about the willingness. Because if there's a percentage of up to 4% of the population who already have a device but are not willing to go online, it's because then there are other challenges. And so we need to look at closing Africa's usage gap, leveraging emerging technologies as an opportunity for Africa to be able to move faster, particularly in this decade of acceleration, which is the AU Agenda 2063's vision in terms of the year of the decade. And so, or the decade of acceleration. So we have to then understand what are the challenges around getting devices at the right price point. One of the key announcements that we made this year at MWC Kigali was around two things. First, that we do understand that there is an opportunity for the majority of the population in terms of their purchasing power, low-income households, underserved populations, to be able to afford devices at a price point of $40 and below. There have also been initiatives and policies like in South Africa by the Minister of Finance, hand in hand with the Minister of ICT, who have removed the ad valorem tax, 9% on 2,500 Rand and below smartphones. And that's another opportunity because it helps to maintain the price point at a very affordable level for the majority of the population. So these are opportunities that we need to grasp, whereby policymakers are doing their thing, they're lending in and leaning into the problem, trying to solve it from where they are. Private sector looking at the minimum specification that addresses quality of service, but at the same time provides that sort of meaningful connectivity for our people to be able to consume content in whether it's education, health, entertainment, a decent device that's fit for purpose and doesn't create issues for networks. And so that's the balance that we're trying to strike, where industries as partners to governments and developmental partners come together to look at the problem of smartphones in Africa.
Yeah, all very important points, and I hope we get to that place where we can get $40 and below smartphones. We know that in Africa, mobile money is very widespread, but I think we often think, oh, everyone's using smartphones, but it's not really the case. Yesterday, you were sharing some interesting stats on kind of how many people are still on USSD, if you don't mind giving a bit of color on that, and kind of why we want to get them onto the app version of mobile money.
Yes. So when we talk about Africa's population being about 1.5 billion and only 30% being online, that 30% is approximately 310 million people. Now, at the same time, when we looked at the state of the industry report, where we revealed our latest figures on how mobile money is doing globally, and particularly in Africa, we see that in the year 2024, mobile money transactions within the continent was a total of $1 trillion. And that's about 70% of the global mobile money value that was transferred in the economy of the world. And so we ask ourselves, if we have 310 million people that have access to smartphones that have gone online, our statistics show that only 69% of those actually use 3G. And 40% use 4G. That means the majority of the population is actually therefore on 2G, which is the majority, which is about 700 million people who have never gone online. And so how are therefore the $1.1 trillion being moved in Africa?
Yeah.
It has to be on the older technologies. 2G is still alive. And 2G predominantly is about sending money using USSD and SMS. Because for you to use the mobile apps, which is the third solution of how you move mobile money, you need a smartphone. And so we can see that there is a lot of value still being served, and the value that people see in mobile money as an enabler for their social economic growth and empowerment and innovation. The opportunity here now is in converting the amount of transactions and the goods and services that can be traded digitally going online. You can imagine what can be achieved by using the apps, super apps that house hundreds and hundreds of small businesses and their applications, and being able to expose that sort of products and services to a wider consumer base. In countries like South Africa, Kenya, where we have about 30 million consumers on mobile money. In Ethiopia, Ethiotel has about 85 million customers on mobile money. I mean, that's a huge base that our small, medium enterprises can use to be able to expose and have their content available to the majority of the population. And that begins to show us where the power of digital trade, leveraging the Africa Continental Free Trade Area, begins to come alive. That we are able to migrate customers from the older technologies towards digital technologies that allow us to have a wider addressable market for our goods and services.
Yeah. Shifting maybe to the AI side, you guys obviously made an announcement about trying to improve African languages in kind of the AI ecosystem. I think people maybe don't understand, if they're using AI in English, they don't understand that there's so many people that can't do that, right? So I guess, what are the risks if we don't get more African language kind of into AI models for populations on the continent?
I think the biggest risk is to see now the other side of the coin that says we do understand that the barriers are around local content in the local language. So it's a chicken and egg. If I am not willing to buy a device, it's because I do not have the content that I require and it's not in my local language. And so for us as Africa to be able to close that 69% usage gap, 660 million of our people who are not haven't gone online ever, we need to help them create their own content. And creating your own content means that you create it in your local language and with your cultural diversity included in AI, because AI is about bringing Africa to the world, bringing Africa its cultural, linguistical diversity, and creating that content that is relevant for our people. And so entrepreneurs, innovators who are solving AI-based applications, challenges that they have in their communities, leveraging even small, language resources to be able to just expose their capability and bring in that relevant content that's needed for Africa. I think that will be part of the magic that will help us to close the usage gap in the shortest time possible.
Yeah. And then maybe just on the energy side, the GSMA ministerial program, you had ministers and regulators meeting to discuss kind of the energy problem. So what were the key priorities that these officials, I guess, discussed in terms of making energy more available, I guess, and how that's obviously so important for the telecoms industry as well?
So globally, I think last year we saw, World Bank alongside other organizations, the Africa Development Bank announced that they were an ambition to connect 300 million Africans in the shortest time possible, and that's through electrification of people's homes. And that goes hand in hand with digitalization, because when we're talking about going online, it's about access to electricity, because devices need to have access to electricity, as well as any solutions around the affordability of data. Because today, countries that have access to electricity on the grid, our statistics as the GSMA have shown that data is more affordable to those countries.
Yeah.
So that means that countries without access to electricity, their populations are paying a premium to have data. And as data becomes the new gold in terms of how we're using it to create content, to consume content, to go online and solve problems, whether it's health, as we said, education, it therefore becomes important to make data affordable. And that's where electricity comes in. At the same time, when you're looking at new and emerging technologies, 5G and beyond, AI and beyond, these technologies, whilst they're more energy efficient, also require more energy.
Yeah.
And therefore, we have to start understanding how do we avail energy for both demand and supply. So demand towards our customers and citizens in the ability to use smartphones, to be able to consume data affordably, but also supply in how infrastructure can be deployed in the most affordable manner. And today, and not tomorrow, because AI is here and now, we have to figure out how we can work together with partners and leverage projects and initiatives such as the Mission 300 towards making sure that as we electrify households and people, we also make sure that we can convert as many of the tower sites and infrastructure to renewable grid energy that allows that affordability to be passed on to customers.
Yeah, and then just that leads into the kind of the investment side. So the GSMA stats are that between 2024 and 2030, operators will invest $77 billion into networks. Is this enough? And what's that going to do for, bridging the digital divide, and how do we get more investment, I guess?
Yes, it definitely isn't enough when you look at trying to bridge a gap of almost 70% of people who, have to go online, because that means that once they come online, you have to expand those networks. So you have to have that CapEx ready to be able to do those expansions. And at the same time, you also have to look at it from our statistics of the GSMA, 35 to 40% of the capital expenditure for deploying infrastructure goes towards energy. Now, that's money that could have been saved towards expanding networks and making networks more affordable for our population. And so how can we be able to use the limited resources that are available and to be able to sustainably invest those resources towards closing the usage gap, generating more demand for existing deployments of infrastructure, and continuing to attract more investment for growth, for innovation, and also for having emerging technologies be prevalent in Africa. Because at the moment, our statistics, as we've launched the 5G in Africa report today, show that we have grown to now 13% of the population covered by 5G. But there is an aspiration to have as many as possible before the end of the decade on 5G. And that means we have to have a lot more investments on 5G, which is not there at the moment. And so I think every dollar saved that doesn't need to be spent on infrastructure outside of telecoms infrastructure is a dollar that's saved towards expanding networks.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the last thing I want to touch on maybe is satellite. We're hearing a lot about, obviously, LEO satellites, the likes of Starlink, OneWeb, and kind of the price of satellite coming down, I suppose. So I'm just interested, in terms of that last coverage gap, how can satellite be used to connect, maybe some of the most rural and most difficult places? And is it cheap enough to actually do that at the moment for that last 9%, if I'm not wrong?
Yes. So in most markets, on average, the typical markets have closed up to 1%. And so that's what we call near universal coverage. And so when you look at just the average for Africa being 9%, it's to say that some markets have structural challenges, access to electricity being the biggest one, or in very unreachable sort of areas, such as whether it's mountainous regions, war-torn areas that require different solutions. The good news is that our sector, in terms of delivering services, digital services to our population, is technology agnostic. And the industry mobile operators are welcome partnerships with any kind of technologies towards closing that coverage gap. And so satellites play a very critical role in their ability to be able to close the coverage gap for very high, hard to access areas, mountainous areas, because of the technology allows that sort of spanning across a diversity, whether it's land bodies, water bodies, forests, parks, in a very safe way. Because, in some markets, tourists, for example, would not want to see base stations in the middle of a park. But if you have coverage through satellite technology, I think that's a solution that will work. And so there is an opportunity for us to continue partnering with satellite technology, and that's what we do as an industry. Many of our operators do have partnerships with satellites on that area, including backhaul transmission. And so I think if we can close the coverage gap, it means that we'll leave no one behind. And therefore, given that the challenge, and over the years, the gap has reduced from 35% to 9% in the last 8 years, it means that it is possible for us to close the gap completely across all markets, and then focus all our efforts continuously on now driving demand to close the usage gap.
Okay, well, thanks so much. You've covered a lot today, so I think we'll leave it there. But thanks very much to Angela Wamola, who is the head of Africa at the GSMA.
Thank you very much for inviting me.